Well, some beautiful sceneries there. That segment usually runs on Business Insight, which comes to you every Thursday at 9 p.m. Now in studio with me is Ruth Odera, who is the manager for Habitat for Humanity International. And the topic of discussion today is the housing sector and how we can ensure that each and every Kenyan is housed as part of the Constitution. Now, but just because I want to highlight a little bit about the housing sector at the moment, the government has been targeting provision of 200,000 housing units annually for all income levels. But however, the production of housing units is currently less than 50,000 units, well below the targeted number. Well, this has culminated to a housing deficit of 2 million units, which is nearly 61% of urban households living in the slums. Thank you for coming to our studios, Ruth.
Thank you.
Well, maybe we can start by what is holding back affordable housing in Kenya?
Well, Carol, several things are holding back affordable housing. One of which is, the definition of affordability. What is affordable and to who? Secondly, we tend to look at the urban areas. We forget that the rural areas also exist. Yeah, so what is affordable for somebody in the urban areas in a certain level of income may not be affordable for people in the rural areas. So the definition is very key to discussions of affordability, and I think that is the starting point for this discussion. What is affordable? Yeah.
Maybe you can describe to us what is affordable in your own terms.
Well, when you look at incomes in Kenya, the cheapest built house using a formal developer is about 3.8 million. When you look at the number of people who can afford that house, is about 180,000 in rural areas and about 200,000 in urban areas. So that is affordability at that level. These are people who earn like 313,000 a month or 4.5 million a year. That is the person who can afford a mortgage of 3.8 million. Yeah. So when you talk about affordability in rural areas and affordability in urban areas, it's very different. Take, for example, our parents, our uncles, people in the rural areas. They are farmers, maybe some of them are small business people, and the question is, what can they afford? What can they afford? People have houses in the rural areas. They live in houses, but are those houses standard houses? Yeah. So in terms of affordability, you need to look at, it is very contextual. It's contextual in terms of what is in the rural areas, what is in the urban areas, what are the levels of income in rural areas, and what are the levels of income in urban areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
The cost of living in the rural areas is usually a bit cheap when compared to urban centers. Yet we have seen most people move away or migrate from rural areas to urban centers and come in and squeeze in with the little space that is available in the urban centers. Maybe you can share with, is housing one of the key reasons why people are moving away? And also now let's combine that with devolution, that now resources are much closer to the people. How can we ensure that now Kenyans can be able to thrive in the counties?
I think people are moving to the urban areas not because of housing and its affordability status. People are moving to urban areas to look for sources of income, livelihoods. And we are saying that the government has done a very good thing to devolve the government, yeah? So if we devolve the government with, additional income sources in the regions, people will not be able to move to, very few urban centers. And that way they can afford, maybe to live in areas where they are. When you look at affordability and, people moving to the urban areas, for me, I think that we should encourage people more to stay in their regions. And encouragement means that we have to have sources of incomes and livelihood so that they can build in those areas. Because what happens, people move to urban areas and what we are creating are slums and squatters. Yeah? Mostly because they cannot afford even houses in the urban areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how then do we make affordable housing a reality? Let's say with devolution, especially in the rural areas?
Well, affordability requires a lot of innovations. And I'm not talking about innovations in terms of materials, materials like even interlocking blocks and all that. I'm talking about innovations in terms of how do we ensure that the rural person has a source of, has sources of income first, and then are able to seek financial service so that they can be able to build, their own houses. You know that in the rural areas, people build incrementally. You'll build your own small house, and then as your status becomes a little bit better, you maybe add a room, you plaster the house, maybe change the house to brick from earth, maybe change the roof from mud, from grass thatch to mabati. Later on, maybe now you do the fencing. So people build incrementally in the rural areas. So for us at Habitat for Humanity, actually one of our main activities is to ensure that people get standard. We reduce homelessness and substandard housing. Yeah. So in order to do that, we are trying various levels of innovations. One of which is we are supporting financial institutions to develop housing products that can be accessed by rural people. You know very well that the banks, the banking system do not provide financial services to the lower end of the market, the bottom of the pyramid. More so because their income sources are very intermittent, very low, so they are not able to access mortgages. So how else can we ensure that these people still get financial services that enable them to improve their houses, build their houses incrementally? So that's what we are doing in the Kenya market and in Uganda market right now. Yeah.
Okay, escalating land prices and also high cost of construction material has one of the biggest bottlenecks to maybe affordable housing. How do we especially handle the issue of land?
I think we are more focused on urban areas, yeah? Because when you go to the rural areas, people own land. And, well, there's pockets there where people do not own land. But in very many rural areas, people own land. Maybe the land is in the name of the household, the head of the household, or the father-in-law, but people own land. What the government can do, I think, is to make sure that we have security or tenure for those lands. People own land, but people generally do not have titles to those land, because land titling and ensuring that the security or tenure for that land is a very long process. Yeah, it has been a very long process. So people just sit. You have land, but you don't have title to it. That is one of the ways in which we can ensure that people in the rural areas, have access to financial services, because they can use this land to also be able to access, some loans, even if they are small loans for incremental building.
Okay, maybe as we come to a close, maybe you can share with us the importance of collaborative efforts between the public and the private sector to ensure that even the government, now that it has rolled out affordable housing as one of its big four agenda, that it's achievable in the next 5 years.
Private-public partnerships is very important, and I'm not talking about PPPs in form of big projects, because for me I want to focus more on rural areas which is highly neglected, not usually discussed. I'm talking about partnerships in terms of, for example, if there's a patient capital somewhere, people with patient capital, or the government wants to do a fund for housing, they should take into consideration, those people or those organizations in housing value chains that make affordable, that ensure that people at the bottom of the pyramid get affordable housing. I'm talking about the government, the government looking at even the SACCO sector, because the SACCO sector is one of the most critical in terms of housing for the rural areas. We know that, the SACCOs, they provide development loans which people ordinarily have always used for housing in the rural areas or in their homes. So the government should think of, you know, using financial institutions like the SACCOs, the microfinance institutions, some of the banks who are willing to go into the rural areas. But not only that, the financial institutions can also collaborate with, you know, people in the housing value chains, like now the developers, the suppliers of materials, like, you know, Mabati rolling mills, like Lafarge, and look for ways in which we can, you know, provide housing solutions cheaply and affordably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I wish you could continue with this conversation, but time is not on our side. But thank you for coming to our studios. Well, we've been talking about affordable housing and how we can be able to bridge the 2 million gap that exists currently in the housing sector.